So yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for coming to Manchester Node.js user group today. I'm kidding, of course. It's LNUG. Thanks to Adam and Thomas doing most of the organizing because I've been away for a while, so let's give them a clap. And of course, thanks to you guys because it was a really nice day outside, but you all nerds decided to come here anyways. So yeah, here we are. So yeah, I wanted to talk about building an AI-based CLI tool in 2024. The AI bit there is mainly for the hype, but I want to talk about building a CLI tool in 2024. The problem I saw while trying to build a CLI tool this year was that there aren't that many good articles online about building CLI tools. Most of them are from like several eons ago when it was like Node.js 0.4 or something, I guess. So I decided to create a talk around this and also try to create content around this so we can try to understand how we can build cross-compatible OS, like cross-OS compatible CLIs using Node.js now. And it's really great at that. So yeah, I am the writing.dev on the internet, or the writing dev in most places, including Twitter. So yeah. Why? So why did I want to build this? Well, firstly, I was experimenting with AI just when the GPT API came out. So yeah, this is just a GPT wrapper in essence. But yeah, I think it's really cool to build products around LLMs nowadays because of generative AIs and stuff. You can build products which can do more. I mean, it sort of leads to non-deterministic computing in a way. And secondly, there's more than one way of building interfaces. So this is Ryan Hoover, the creator of Product Hunt, who commented on one of the products there saying that he's interested in voice-driven experiences. And yeah, so you see a lot of hype around that. So just by incorporating a different kind of interface into your product, you start generating sort of ideas and interest around your product. And this was a post or a tweet by a VC, so take it with a grain of salt of course, who said that UI engineers will lose their jobs now because you can just ask Siri to do something and then it hooks up into your app using an API to directly execute the task. So of course, I wanted to sort of go at the back end of building applications and try to build something which is just CLI driven for the start. So what is the thing? I'll give a quick demo of how it works, and yeah, parts of this, yeah, just a content warning. Some of the slides that I'm showing are light themed. Like I'm using a light theme with my code editor, so please don't complain. And yeah, so how does it work? So yeah, originally it was called How, but I changed the name to Howitzer because if you search for How CLI Copilot, it would just show GitHub's Copilot instead. And yeah, so you can basically ask questions to it in natural language. So you can ask something like, how do I get my system specs? And it will then call the GPT API, of course, and it will give you the command. Then you can choose to run the command, which then gives you the output there directly. So instead of having to memorize all of these different Unix commands, you can just ask the CLI tool directly. Another simple thing you might want to do is like, how do I get the DNS info of the writing.dev. So I've auto-completed this already. So if I run that, then yeah, it says dig the writing.dev. If I choose to run this command, then it gives the output of the command directly. So of course, as you can see, it's a very simple app. Originally, it was less than 100 lines of code, but then I added some nice UX around it, which increased the size a little bit. But I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. So yeah, that is the actual tool. And now I want to go a little bit about the problems and solutions. So how did I end up at this phase? Of course, as you can see, it's just a simple command. I say how, and then it automatically runs it in the backend. So it's a proper CLI tool. But doing this in Node.js is a little bit tough. So the first problem is that, I think that it's on a timer probably, but yeah. So the first problem is that I faced was that TypeScript sucks. I didn't want to write build tooling around TypeScript. So for example, how many ways are there to build a new TypeScript project? Like,
Burn it. Burn. Use burn.
yeah. I mean, apart from burn, there's several. Like for example, TSUp, there's TSNode, there's Wheat, there's Parcel. I mean, there's n number of ways you can build a TypeScript project. But there's one thing common with all of them. You're adding a build step. So you're adding complexity into your whole project. So instead of that, I wanted the ability to have types, but I didn't want to have a build step. So what I did was use ES modules instead. If it's good enough for Svelte, it's good enough for your project. So please move to ES modules instead of TypeScript to help improve the developer experience around it. ES modules have been supported in Node.js since 2019, actually, and I'm going to give a demo of how they actually look like. So don't be afraid of publishing a library to NPM, which is just ES modules only. And yeah, basically to start we saw what it took to start out with a TypeScript project, but for ES modules, since it's Node native, you can just run npm init-y, of course. Now, to give you a quick demo of what the application, the first version of the application actually looks like. So basically, I'm using the OpenAI SDK, of course. It's actually really good. It's an auto-generated SDK based on their API, so it's mostly up to date, but they haven't added GPT-4o mini to it yet on the type side. So it's also sometimes behind unless they actually run the SDK generation process. So yeah, a quick explanation of what's actually happening here. It's actually quite straightforward. I'm initializing a new client based on the OpenAI library. In this case, it's just picking up the API key from my environment variables instead of explicitly passing it in. I'm generating a list of messages here to pass to the LLM. So a role in a message is basically like what context is that message being sent in? Is it the user? Is it the chatbot? Or is it like a system prompt? Basically, you're telling the LLM what you want to do. So in this case, this is a prompt that I built using another LLM, of course, because yeah, LLMs are notoriously difficult to give the right prompts to. So this basically gives the users command line to the LLM. It gives a negative prompt saying that ignore any pleasantries or comments, stuff like that. And then it also gives the users operating system to it. So it tries to make it as operating system independent as possible, and we are going to go towards that. And next, I'm passing in the user prompt manually for now, so how can I get my system specs? That's what the question we asked before was, and I'm just passing it in here. And then we are just getting a completion from the LLM and then logging it. So let's see how this works. I can simply do node slide1 index.mjs. Yeah, and that it, of course, gives us the command here in the content file, content property, which we can use. And sorry, I missed the most important part, which is the ES modules bit. So basically, in ES modules, you can import any types from a TypeScript file. So in this case, you have to do, to import a TypeScript file as an alias, you have to do something funky. You have to do a type def, then use an import. So I'm using import openai.openai.chat completion message param, aliasing it to chat message, and then using it to add type safety to the messages array here. And I can quickly show you how it autocompletes. So it autocompletes to basically all of the parameters being imported from OpenAI. So in this way, you can add type safety to your ESM component without having to do extra bits. And since we are using imports and not requires, it also automatically imports the types here. So if you add an import, if you are using an ESM import, then it should automatically import the types without having to explicitly do that. But in this case, of course, I'm explicitly typing this because I want to ensure that the messages array here has the type safety. And of course, if you try to add new things, then it tries to autocomplete it for you. So you can add a new role with a specific role name and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the main benefit of ESM and why I chose to go with that to avoid a build step. So the next problem is that, oops, I'm moving. This is going a bit too fast. So yeah, how do I add the terminal bits? So you have your simple application right now with just, it's a node script, right? It's not doing anything special. It's not exactly a CLI tool. So how do you add the terminal bits, like reading from the command line or reading user input and stuff like that? So for doing that, you use certain tools, certain libraries, just like the JavaScript ecosystem, everything is a library, npm install away. So there's Commander and Enquirer, two tools which you can use. Commander is used for creating a nice CLI experience around your app. So you can do things like create new commands. You can yeah, you can basically add new commands, accept certain parameters, make certain parameters optional, stuff like that. And Inquirer allows you to build a nice user interface, like a prompt interface and stuff like that, which I had done initially at the start here with my own tool. So in this case, let's have a look at how it actually works. So we'll only look at Commander for now. To initialize a new CLI using Commander, you initialize a program. I mean, you firstly import command from Commander, which is its base class. You initialize it, and then you can pass it all of the attributes that you need to pass in here. So in here, I'm passing the version of the CLI tool and its description. But if you integrate it into your product, so it would look something like this, where you are using program.argument. So this is the syntax for adding a new sort of command to your tool. So you can add an argument, which is a query. You add a description to that query, and then you add in an action which happens when that query gets passed in. So if someone misses a query, it automatically also does input handling for you. So it's sort of like Zord, but for your CLI. And I'll give a quick demo of how this works as well. So we can do something like node CLI2 / final.mjs. In this case, I am taking the query from the CLI though. So let's see what happens if I don't pass in the query. I think it will still not fail in this case because an empty string will be passed, but there's only one way to find out. So okay, yeah, it actually errors out. So it does input validation for us. Mainly it allows us to avoid passing in the wrong query, and I think the help command should work as well. Yeah, so if you run the help command, then it prints out all of the things that you had passed in the program. So Commander allows, I mean, it's just a nice experience to work with while building a new CLI. And yeah, so how would this actually work if I manually pass in a command here? So I can ask something like list files in current directory maybe. I mean, of course, we all know it's ls, but we want to make sure that our tool is actually working. So yeah, in this case, it returns ls. I don't know what the extra stuff being passed in there is, but it's mainly because our prompt is quite simple right now, but we can fix that later. So right now, yeah, we've got a CLI tool. It accepts a parameter, and based on that, it's giving some form of output. But there's certain things missing here, of course. So yeah, let's try to deploy this. This is just a node script right now, right? We haven't yet installed this to our computer using npm yet. So let's try to do that and see what happens. So what I can do is, yeah, in this case, in index.js in slide 3 here, it's the same file that we were seeing previously. I will try to install that now. So it's actually very simple. So to convert an npm package into a CLI is very simple. You just add a bin property to your package.json, and then you add the name of the command that you want to use, and then you add an entry file for that. So in this case, the command I want to use is how, and the entry I want to use is maybe slide3/index.mjs. And then, yeah, let's try to install this globally. So if I do npm -j, I think that goes before. Yeah, I just need to sudo that, and then add my password in. So now if I try to run how do I maybe list my files, then okay, we are actually getting a really random error, which is the third problem that we are facing, that yeah, this is being treated as bash. So as you can see here, the CLI itself, while trying to run that binary, is trying to run the JavaScript file as a bash file or like a shell script file. And so it returns a random image magic error in this case. So how do we make it treat JavaScript files as JavaScript files while running them from the CLI, rather than trying to parse it via bash or ZSH or whatever? So the solution is to add a shebang. So the shebang that we add here is basically a shebang user bin env node. So it uses the user's node environment to run that specific file. And this is a very simple solution. So it just adds a new line up there, and now it should run for us. So to quickly test this out, sorry, do you want me to go there? Okay, cool. So yeah, to quickly test this out, we can npm install that again. And now if we run the how command, then this time it works because your command line emulator, I guess command line emulator knows how to treat that file. So it knows to treat that file as a node.js file, and that's why it's able to work fine this time. I'm sure that I used the wrong terminology there, and someone will correct me later. And problem 4, so how to make this cross-OS compatible. So right now you saw that we are injecting into the prompt that it has to be, it has to return data in ZSH and for a Mac OS device, but we can, for example, use something else. Like, for example, I might want to use a Windows laptop and PowerShell, or a Windows laptop and Bash as well, because that's possible, right? So the way you would do that is read the user's environment. In JavaScript, it's super simple to do that. You can use process.env.shell, which allows you to import the user's current execution environment. So that might be PowerShell or batch scripts or whatever. And then you can get their operating system from platform here. So if I highlight on platform, it shows a list of all of the possible values here. And if I highlight on shell, I think shell itself is a string because there are a lot of environments out there. And interestingly enough, this is super useful if you're trying to execute custom code in a user's environment. So in my case, since I'm executing commands, I want to use the right tool. I want to use ZSH or Bash or whatever the user is executing the command from, and not any other random tool which might not be present on the user's operating system. So if we modify the command using that, then we simply inject those variables here. So after importing shell, we can just import shell. So we say you're an AI assistant that only responds with shell command line instructions for the OS platform. And then using that, our prompt then is automatically customized to whatever operating system and shell environment that the user is running the prompt in. So of course, I'm not going to run this one again because it's quite straightforward. And finally, so relative imports are sort of blocked. And this is a problem which isn't exactly unique to CLI tools. It's unique to anything which is installed in your node modules but wants to access a file which might be present in a relative path relative to the node module itself. So I'll explain how. So the ideal solution to this would be to use some path magic. So you would be able to use __ dir name and stuff like that to get the current directory that the file is being currently called from. And in this case, I'll show you why it might not work in ES modules. So for ES modules, so firstly, let's try to use relative imports directly. For example, if I want to, instead of having to read the data twice, so instead of having to write what the user's version was and what the description of the package is twice, once in the index.mjs file here and once in package.json, I can deduplicate it by reading it from package.json directly. So you might think that you can use import package from package.json directly, but ES modules kind of makes that difficult, but that's beyond the scope of this talk. Another solution you might think of is using json.parse and then using read file sync. So that's what we're going to try to do right now, and then I'll explain why that might not work. So once we do that, let's try to install it first. So I go to package.json again, and then I do slide 5/index.mjs, and then I can do sudo npm install globally, and then if I try to run how, then it should throw me an error. Oh, it actually works. I think that's because I'm executing from the context of the root directory, which already has a package.json here. So relative to my current path, I do have a package.json. But if I was in a different file, so if I went a directory up, and if I try to run that command again, I think it should throw the error now. So yes, now in this case, it says that no such file or directory, open package.json, because as you can see here, it's trying to read it from relative to the current path. So again, if you've worked with Node.js in the past, you would assume that something like __ dir name would work. So let's try to do that. So I would do something like __ dir name, which actually returns the current directory name when you are using proper Node.js without ES modules, I guess. And if I try to install this now, I'll have to cd into the directory again, and then npm install this, go up a directory again, and try to, run that command. So in this case, yeah, it says dir name is not defined in ES module scope. So we are sort of shooting ourselves in the foot here by using ES modules a little bit, because a lot of the things that you just took for granted in Node.js are no longer present. So the solution for this is actually using import.meta.url instead. So I like to think that ES modules treats every file you're using like a browser JavaScript file. So in that case, every file itself has a URL. In this case, the URL for the file would be the file path, which points to that particular file. And you can use the path library from Node.js itself to convert that URL path into file path. So file URI to path, and then you can convert that into a directory name instead. And if you use that, then it works correctly this time. And I've used the double dots here because we want to go one directory up from this directory. So because the package.json file, of course, exists in the root directory and not the slide 5 directory. So if I go back to package.json, change this to final.mjs, and then npm install. Yeah, I need to go here, npm install, and then if I try to run the how command by going up, yeah, this time it works fine, even though it's in a different directory, because it can just read from the relative path which we have generated there. So yeah, I think that was pretty much my talk. So thank you. I wanted to give a very simple introduction to how to build CLI. So thanks. Yeah.
What are these type definitions in comments?
Yeah. So sorry for not explaining it well. Those are basically JS docs type definitions. So instead of having to use TypeScript type definitions, which you would use if you were using TypeScript, you can now use JSDoc type definitions, which support all of TypeScript's type definitions as well. So instead of having to use a build tool to convert TypeScript files into JavaScript files, you can now use JavaScript files directly with JSDocs comments inside of them, which define the types of the variables that you want to use.
Yeah, but this is just documentation.
Or
does it actually check the types?
Yeah, it actually checks the types. So you can use TSC to type check JSDoc comments as well.
Okay, but then you use TSC, so if you don't use TSC...
Yeah, you don't get type checks, but you don't need to use a build tool, so that's the main advantage.
Yes, so you don't use TSC, so you didn't check the types, you just have them defined. But you could check them with TSC if you wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
A couple of questions actually.
Yeah.
You know when you moved one directory outside of where the program was installed, right? And you run the command, it worked. Now, if you move two directories outside, will it work?
Yeah, of course. You can navigate anywhere, and it will still work. Because I mean, I'll explain the reason why it will still work, and then I'll show you how it works. So the reason why it would work is that we are, sorry, Git blame is picking up there. So yeah, import.meta.url points to this specific file, and whatever context this file is running in, be it like an npm module or locally via Node.js script or whatever, this value will always point to wherever this file is located. And so we are converting that file path URI to a path instead, which is then allowing us to do this, which points to the actual package.json file. And now I can, yeah, so I can go anywhere, and I'll still, if I run the how command, it will still point to the right file there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then one other question, you know your shebang?
Yeah.
Right? Assume that you don't have Node installed in your system.
Yeah.
Right? How would how would the shebang help you at all?
Yeah, so in that case, it will definitely be a problem. So this package, having a package.json and installing a library using npm install assumes that you have got Node.js already installed in your machine. So that's a big assumption that we're making here. Of course, we would use something like Golang if we wanted to, make it independent of having Node.js installed, I guess. Yeah.
So I assume this is mostly used if you are using a command line and you want to know what the tooltips you might miss are, what commands you might not remember. If you wanted to actually know lines of code to put into one of your files, would you be able to ask the command line interface to do that? Would it just give you those lines of code in a text response, or would it be able to actually execute the command to go in and put that code there?
So it should be able to do that. So I can ask it, for example, well, let's install my actual tool. Yeah, if I do that, it should install it globally. And now I can do something like, if I go to the directory first, how do I create a Python server file and save it locally maybe so that it knows that I actually want to save that as well. Then, I mean, again, this isn't something that my tool is doing, this is something that the GPT API is returning, of course. So if it returns this command, let's try to execute it. So it hasn't returned anything yet, but yeah, we see server.py. So it created server.py here somewhere. Yeah. So it created some output and then pasted it to server.py. So if I do cat server.py, then yeah, it still has that, because you can do it via Unix commands, right? So as long as you can do it via Unix commands or PowerShell commands or whatever, the CLI tool should be able to help you with that. Yeah, any other questions? Nope, okay, yeah, oh, sorry, go on.
How much does it cost?
It's actually very cheap. So GPT-4o mini, I think it's the cheapest tool out there. It costs like $0.005 per token or something. I mean, of course, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like super cheap. I've put in $10 in, I would say, like very early this year, maybe February or something, but I haven't still run out just by building this tool and working on other side projects, sort of.
Sounds too low. Very low. Because
To add to that, I use GPT-4o and mini. Even the $10 that I added, they knew of this thing being run out for a blogging platform.
Okay.
It's super cheap.
Yeah, so it's super cheap. But I think the GPT-4o mini performs really bad as compared to GPT-4o, especially if you're trying to do stuff like run commands successfully on your command line, I think.
I did some comparison. They are very comparable, and it's like 3 to 5 times faster.
Yeah, it's definitely faster.
Output price for GPT for mini is like 5 times less.
Yeah.
For output token, but usually you put more inside than take out.
Makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, that's my website. Reach out to me if you want to, and I'm available for independent consulting on any AI projects you might have. So, thank you.
So that concludes LNUG for tonight. We're going to keep talking here.
I'm just waiting for you.